My parents invited me and my daughter to Thanksgiving, but while my sister and her kids ate turkey with the family, we were shoved to a side table. My mother laughed. Be grateful we even gave you a seat. My daughter got cold mashed potatoes. I took her hand and left. Hours later, my phone was flooded with missed calls. I never answered. Breakfast in the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. She wore hospital scrubs with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Having worked as a nurse at the local hospital for 15 years, her hands moved with a stability and gentleness born from years of experience. Emma, time to get up. Breakfast is ready, she called. In response, the sound of footsteps running down the stairs could be heard. Her 10-year-old daughter Emma had her mother's bright brown hair and the blue eyes of her father Mike, from whom Carol was currently separated. Good morning, Mom, Emma said, sitting at the table and reaching for the pancakes Carol had prepared. Only 2 more days until Thanksgiving break. Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house? Carol paused before answering. Yes, Grandma invited us this year. It was actually the first invitation in 3 years. Carol's relationship with her parents had always been complicated, especially with her mother Eleanor. Raised as the daughter of a successful Wall Street banker, Eleanor was pretentious and valued social status above all else. In contrast, her father Walter came from a typical middle-class background, and had led a stable life as a university professor, but rarely opposed his wife's opinions due to his indecisive nature. When Carol answered the phone, it was the hospital calling. Can you start your shift 2 hours earlier today? Maria isn't feeling well. Of course, I'll be right there, she replied. Hanging up, Carol looked at Emma. I'm sorry, sweetie, but I need to leave a little early today. Trisha's mom will pick you up after school. I should be home by 7. Emma nodded, accustomed to the situation. In her own way, she understood that her mother worked hard to raise her alone. As Carol started the car engine, she found herself lost in thought. She remembered the day 5 years ago when her relationship with her husband Mike deteriorated, and he moved to another city in what they called a temporary assignment. Though they hadn't divorced, they were taking their time considering the possibility of reconciliation. Mike worked busy hours as a construction site supervisor, but came to see Emma every weekend. Recently, their relationship had been improving gradually, and he had let her know he would join them at her parents' house for Thanksgiving after finishing work. Carol collected herself and drove to work. Her job at the hospital was busy, but she attended to each patient with care and a warm smile. Her colleagues trusted her, and the hospital director highly valued her work. On her way home, Carol received a call from her sister Donna. Carol, you're coming for Thanksgiving, right? Mom's worried again. At 42, Donna was a partner at a well-known local law firm. Having received all the love and affection from their parents, especially their mother, her position within the family was stable, unlike Carol's. Yes, I'm coming. Mike will be joining us later too. Mike too? Are you two getting back together? There was obvious surprise in Donna's voice. I'm not sure yet, but we're talking about trying again for Emma's sake. I see. Donna's response was ambiguous. Anyway, let's meet on Thursday. Jason and Lily are looking forward to it. With a 12-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter, Donna valued having the whole family together for Thanksgiving each year. However, Carol never felt that her sister truly welcomed her or her niece, Emma. When she got home, Emma had already been dropped off by Trisha's mother and was doing her homework. Carol stroked Emma's head and began discussing preparations for Thanksgiving. What should we bring to Grandma's? How about a traditional pumpkin pie and maybe an album with your photos? Yes. Emma's eyes sparkled. I want to show them my school project photos too. Carol smiled, but there was still a shadow of anxiety in her eyes. She recalled what had happened at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. She had been hurt by her mother's cold attitude then, but this year she wanted to create good memories, especially for Emma. As she was getting out ingredients for the pie in the kitchen, Carol's cell phone rang. It was Mike. Carol, I'll be a little late the day after tomorrow, but I'll definitely be there. Please give my regards to Emma. Thank you, Mike. Emma's looking forward to it. After hanging up, Carol took a deep breath. Throughout the years of enduring family friction, Emma's presence had always been her support. She was determined to get through this Thanksgiving with a smile, for her daughter's sake. On Thanksgiving morning, Carol checked her outfit in the mirror several times. She had chosen a gentle blue dress with a simple silver necklace. Emma wore her favorite red dress, her hair adorned with small braids her mother had plaited. You look lovely, Emma, Carol said, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. The pie for Grandma is ready too. The two of them loaded the homemade pumpkin pie and carefully selected presents into the car. After a 30-minute drive, they arrived at her parents' house in an affluent Boston suburb. The spacious 2-story stone mansion spoke of its owner's wealth through its refined appearance. Emma, smile, Carol whispered before pressing the doorbell. Her mother Eleanor opened the door. Even at 65 she hadn't lost her elegance, wearing pearl necklaces and an expensive tweed ensemble. "Oh, you've arrived early," Eleanor's words of welcome lacked warmth. "Hello, Mother." "Thank you for inviting us," Carol responded with a tense smile. "Hello, Grandma," Emma greeted cheerfully. Eleanor merely patted Emma's head lightly before leading them into the house. In the living room, her sister Donna and her family, along with Walter and other relatives, were already chatting. "Hello, Donna, Stanley," Carol greeted her sister's husband as well. Donna hurriedly gave her a kiss on the cheek before immediately returning to her conversation with another relative. Her children, though noticing Emma, made no effort to approach her. Only Walter stood up to give Carol and Emma welcoming hugs. "I'm glad you came," Walter whispered in Carol's ear. "I'm sorry for being a weak father." Carol's heart ached at her father's words, but she didn't show it in her expression. Taking Emma's hand, she offered the gifts they had brought. "Mother, these are our Thanksgiving presents." I included photos of Emma's school projects too. Eleanor simply accepted them and placed them on the table. "Speaking of which, have you heard about Donna's children's performance in the national mock trial competition?" Jason placed first in the state. As time passed, Carol and Emma sat quietly in a corner of the living room. There seemed to be no opening for them to join the surrounding conversations, and they felt isolated. Emma tried several times to talk to her cousins, but they were engrossed in adult topics and showed no interest in her. Finally, it was time for dinner. In the dining room, a large oak table was gorgeously decorated with candles and flowers. Walter entered with a traditional turkey and began preparing to carve it. As relatives took their seats one after another, Carol and Emma were also looking for places to sit. Just as Emma approached a chair near her cousins, Eleanor intervened. "You two will sit over there." She pointed to a small side table placed in a sort of hallway between the kitchen and dining room. The cheap folding table with visible joints had only 2 plastic chairs beside it. The color drained from Carol's face. Donna and her family were seated at the grand dining table with their parents and other relatives, while she and Emma were relegated to a separate area. "Why can't we sit with everyone else?" Emma voiced an honest question. Eleanor shrugged with a somewhat mocking expression. "You should be grateful I prepared seats for you at all." Those words cut through Carol's heart like a knife. Walter looked visibly uncomfortable with his wife's behavior but said nothing and continued carving the turkey. Carol took Emma's hand and headed toward the side table. She felt like her heart was breaking seeing her daughter's hurt expression, but she tried to maintain a smile. As service began, the people at the main table were served warm turkey, plenty of gravy, and crispy baked casseroles one after another. However, the plates brought to Carol and Emma contained only cold mashed potatoes and a few vegetables. "Mom," Emma called in a small voice, "is this all?" Carol felt sadness and anger welling up inside her. The cold treatment from her mother since childhood, the unequal treatment compared to her sister, and now the reality that it extended even to her beloved daughter. Emma had tears in her eyes. At 10 years old she could sense the unfairness of the situation. In that moment, something within Carol transformed into determination. She slowly stood up and took Emma's hand. "Emma, let's go." The living room fell silent instantly. Carol handed Emma a small note, gently saying, "Don't forget to give this to Grandma." "Thank you, but we're done here," Carol said in a voice that wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but was loud enough for everyone to hear. Emma followed her mother's instructions, walking up to her grandmother and handing her the note. Before Eleanor could say anything, Carol had already pulled Emma toward the entrance. The sound of the door closing echoed throughout the house. Eleanor tried to hide her disturbed expression, quickly making excuses to the relatives. She always overreacts. But everyone felt the heaviness in the air. Walter sank into his chair, covering his face with his hands. Donna said nothing, but looked at her own children with a contemplative expression. Outside, Carol and Emma felt a strange sense of liberation, despite being enveloped in the cold November wind. Carol's car slowly left the residential area and headed toward Main Street. Emma sat in the passenger seat, silently staring out the window. Her small profile showed a depth of thought unusual for a 10-year-old. "I'm sorry, Emma," Carol said, when they stopped at a traffic light. "I never meant for you to experience something like that." Emma turned to her mother. "It's not your fault, Mom. Grandma's just being mean." At those honest words, Carol's expression became a mixture of laughter and tears. "You must be hungry. Shall we go somewhere to eat?" They decided to stop at the Bluebird, a popular local diner. It was one of the few places open on Thanksgiving Day. The interior was unexpectedly busy, and they were shown to a small booth by the wall. In the classic American diner atmosphere, a Thanksgiving special menu was being offered. "Hello, everyone. Eating out on Thanksgiving?" Doris, an elderly waitress with a warm smile, greeted them. She was a regular patient at Carol's hospital. "Just some circumstances," Carol answered simply. Doris seemed to sense something from their demeanor. "Today's turkey dinner is excellent, and I'll throw in some pumpkin pie on the house too." As warm food was laid out on the table, Emma's expression brightened. Carol took out her cell phone and sent a message to Mike. "Decided not to go to my parents' house. I'll explain later." We're at the Bluebird. Halfway through the meal, Emma suddenly spoke up. Mom, I wrote that note to Grandma myself. Carol stopped her chopsticks in surprise. What did you write? Grandma, why do you hate Mom? Mom is always crying. But we are strong, Emma recited as if she had memorized it. I've seen Mom crying several times after phone calls. Tears welled up in Carol's eyes. It pained her to know that her daughter had noticed her suffering and was trying to protect her. She leaned across the table and embraced Emma. You really are a strong girl, Carol said, burying her face in her daughter's hair. Mom can keep going because of you. Her cell phone rang, but Carol didn't answer. She only checked the message from Mike in a meeting. But, is something wrong? Can't leave right away, but I'm worried. She sent a brief reply explaining the situation. You don't need to go to my parents' house. We'll spend time at the diner. At Eleanor and Walter's house, Thanksgiving dinner continued in a strange atmosphere. Eleanor tried to hide the note Emma had given her under the table, but Carol's Aunt Marge noticed. Eleanor, what's that? It's what Emma gave you, isn't it? Just a drawing, Eleanor tried to cover up. But Marge had already taken the note. She put on her reading glasses and read the contents aloud. Grandma, why do you hate Mom? Mom is always crying. But we are strong. Silence spread across the dining table. All the relatives couldn't suppress their varied reactions. Donna covered her face with both hands, and her husband Stanley leaned back in his chair uncomfortably. Walter finally stood up. Something that had been suppressed for years was burning in his eyes. This has gone too far, Eleanor. His voice was quiet, but filled with strong determination. Carol is our daughter, Emma is our granddaughter, and yet you. I what? Eleanor responded defensively. She's the one who broke family tradition. Marrying that man, living separately without divorcing? She's a family disgrace. Disgrace? Marge raised her voice. Eleanor, you should be ashamed of yourself, making that child and Emma sit at a side table. As your longtime friend, I must say this is too cruel. The room divided into two opinions. Some relatives supported Eleanor, while others showed discomfort. 12-year-old Jason and 8-year-old Lily looked at their parents with confused expressions. Mom, why don't we ever play with Emma? Lily suddenly asked. You always just say another time. Donna couldn't answer her daughter's question. In her heart, she had to admit that she too had been cold to her sister under her mother's influence. The meal continued in silence. Around the time dessert was served, the doorbell rang. When Walter opened the door, Mike was standing there. He looked a bit tired in his business suit but greeted politely. Hello, Walter. Where are Carol and Emma? They've already left. Walter stumbled over his words. Mike's expression clouded. What happened? Walter led Mike to the living room. Eleanor looked at her husband unpleasantly but didn't want to cause more issues in front of the relatives. Mike entered the living room and greeted everyone. But he immediately sensed the heaviness in the air. Carol's Aunt Marge stood up and began explaining what had happened that day without reservation, about the side table, the cold food, and Emma's note. Read this. Marge handed him the note. After reading it, Mike's face changed. His usually calm expression was filled with anger and disappointment. He gently folded the note and put it in his pocket. Is this how you treat your daughter and granddaughter? Mike quietly but sternly looked at Eleanor. It's not my fault she's separated from you, Eleanor retorted. This isn't about our marriage. Mike's voice was low and trembling with controlled anger. I absolutely cannot forgive treating my wife and daughter this way. Do you understand how much Carol has been hurt, and now Emma is feeling that pain too? Eleanor tried to make excuses again, but Mike raised his hand to stop her. That's enough, he said resolutely. If you can't cherish Carol and Emma, then our family relationship ends here. He slightly bowed his head to all the relatives, said excuse me, and left. Those remaining in the room were at a loss for words. Walter passed by Eleanor, briefly saying, I'm going too. He took his coat and left his wife of many years behind. Back in his car, Mike sat with his eyes closed, still gripping the steering wheel. He called Carol, but there was no answer. Instead, he sent a text message, heading to the Bluebird. Please wait for me. As he started the car, he could see in his rearview mirror that Eleanor was standing at the entrance, watching him leave, but she was no longer his concern. His heart was full of thoughts about his wife and daughter, who must still be hurting at this moment. Eleanor returned to the house and took her seat for dessert. She tried to act as if nothing had changed, but everything had already changed. Carol's apartment living room was filled with the warm aroma of takeout food from the Bluebird. Emma sat nestled next to Mike on the sofa, eating the cake he had brought. Carol's cell phone on the coffee table kept ringing incessantly. The screen displayed notification after notification, missed call from Mom, call from Donna, call from Walter, call from unknown number. But Carol made no attempt to respond to any of them. Aren't you going to answer? Mike asked, looking at her intently. Carol shrugged with a relaxed appearance. Just for today, I want to cherish our time together. She returned from the kitchen with hot chocolate. 3 mugs floated with small marshmallows. Dad, will you be here tomorrow too? Emma asked hopefully. Mike glanced at Carol. That's yes, of course, Carol answered with a smile. If Dad doesn't mind. Actually, Mike straightened his posture with a slightly nervous look. Carol, Emma, there's something I want to talk about. He took a small envelope from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. This is a reservation confirmation. I've decided to end my apartment lease in San Diego next month. I'm planning to move back here. Really? Emma nearly jumped up. Only if you two are okay with it. Mike carefully chose his words. I want to end our separation and try again. Carol was speechless. After 5 years of separation, she hadn't expected a reconciliation proposal to come in this form. My couch is always available, she finally joked, but tears shone in her eyes. Emma went back and forth between her parents, hugging them both. Best Thanksgiving ever. The three continued their small impromptu Thanksgiving party until late at night. Carol laughed from her heart for the first time in a long while. Mike told funny stories about work, and Emma talked about her adventures at school. And all calls from the outside world were sent to voicemail. The next morning, Carol woke up to the sound of Mike and Emma making pancakes. It had been the most peaceful sleep she'd had in a long time. Just as she was about to enter the kitchen, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Carol said, tightening her bathrobe as she headed for the door. When she opened it, Walter was standing there. With his tired expression, he looked like he hadn't slept all night. Dad? Carol said in surprise. Can we talk? Walter's voice was small and thin. Carol invited her father into the living room. Mike and Emma peeked out from the kitchen and greeted Walter. After a slight hesitation, Emma went to hug her grandfather. I'll make some coffee, Carol said. As Walter sat down, he exhaled deeply. First, let me apologize, for yesterday, and for everything before. He clasped his hands and placed them on his knees. For the first time he looked like an insecure old man. For years I wanted to be free from Eleanor's control, but I lacked courage. I yielded to my wife's demands and couldn't protect you. Carol silently listened to her father's words. A mixture of anger, sadness, and empathy swirled within her. Emma's note, it resonated with me, Walter continued. That child saw the truth. How unfairly Eleanor has treated you. And how I couldn't stop it. Last night, for the first time, I didn't go home, he admitted, somewhat embarrassed. I stayed at a hotel and thought all night. Carol, I should have protected you more. Tears fell from his eyes. In his 67 years of life, Carol had never seen Walter cry in front of others. Dad. She searched for words. I've blamed you too. But now I understand that Mom also had issues. Mike brought coffee and quietly joined the conversation. Walter, Carol, and Emma are wonderful people. Don't you think they deserve to be cherished by their family? Walter nodded. Of course. That's why I want to change. I'm going to reconsider my relationship with Eleanor too. She's suffering as well. Her mother did the same things to her. At those words, Carol was prompted to consider the background of her mother's behavior for the first time. A chain of hatred, she thought. About a week later, an unexpected visitor appeared. Saturday afternoon, shortly after Emma returned from ballet lessons, Eleanor was standing at the door of Carol's apartment. She looked smaller than usual and held a small paper bag in her hand. May I come in? Eleanor's voice was different from her usual confident tone. Carol silently invited her mother in. When Emma saw her grandmother, she half hid behind Mike. What do you want? Carol asked, crossing her arms. Your embarrassing behavior caused Eleanor habitually began to blame, but her expression soon softened. No, that's not it. Grandma. Emma suddenly stepped forward. Don't hurt Mom. Her eyes gazed straight at Eleanor. The pure sense of justice of a child and a sharper insight than adults was evident in her expression. For the first time, disturbance was visible in Eleanor's eyes. She knelt before Emma, meeting her gaze. Grandma might have been wrong. Mike had been silently watching the situation, but here he quietly said, Emma sees the truth. She's much wiser than us adults. Eleanor slowly stood up and offered the paper bag she had brought to Carol. This is for Emma, a hand-knitted sweater. I knitted it myself. Carol was surprised. She had never heard of her mother knitting by hand. Your mother, that is, my mother, was cold to me too, Eleanor quietly confessed. Family honor and appearances were everything, and I was taught that expressions of affection were signs of weakness. In her words, Carol glimpsed the wounds within her mother for the first time. Eleanor hadn't completely changed, but at least she had begun to reconsider her actions. Don't think this resolves everything, Carol said frankly. But if you want to build a relationship with Emma, you're welcome. Eleanor gave a small nod. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but a small step had been taken. Carol looked toward Mike and Emma. They stood by her side, offering silent support. You are my real family, she said in a small voice. The three embraced tightly, and Eleanor watched them from a distance. On Thanksgiving morning a year later, Carol's apartment was filled with the sounds of busy preparations. In the kitchen, Mike was preparing a large turkey, and Emma was setting the table in the living room. Outside the window, Boston's first snow was quietly beginning to fall. Which tablecloth is better, blue or white? Emma asked, holding different colored cloths in both hands. Now, 11 years old, she had grown a bit taller over the year and had a confident expression. Blue would be lovely, Carol answered from the sofa. Beside her was a phone, as she had just finished calling the last guest to confirm. Mike and Carol officially reconciled 3 months ago, and Mike was granted a transfer to the local office of his construction company. Their relationship was stronger than before, having learned to respect each other's differences. Emma couldn't hide her joy at having both parents together. The doorbell rang, and when Carol opened it, Walter was standing there. In his hands were a bouquet and wine. Dad, you're early. Carol warmly welcomed her father. Walter had changed greatly over the year. He had finally learned to live according to his own will, resumed his hobby of photography, and joined a local photography club. His relationship with Eleanor had also changed, and though they still lived together, it was gradually shifting toward a more equal partnership. "Where's Eleanor?" Mike poked his head out from the kitchen. "She'll be here soon," Walter answered. "She's a bit nervous." Eleanor had initially said she wouldn't participate in this year's Thanksgiving, but ultimately decided to come alone. She hadn't completely changed, but she had started attending psychological counseling once a week and was confronting her behavioral patterns. The doorbell rang again, and this time Donna and her family arrived. Since last Thanksgiving, Donna had also begun to reflect on her actions. Her dependence on her parents had decreased, and she was working on repairing her relationship with Carol. "It's been a while," Donna smiled awkwardly. Repairing the sisterly relationship was taking time, but at least dialogue had begun. Later in the afternoon, Eleanor arrived as the last guest. She carried a small gift bag, and was dressed more casually than usual. "Sorry I'm late," she said somewhat hesitantly. When Emma saw her grandmother, she ran to her without hesitation and hugged her. "Grandma, I'm so glad you came." A surprised and joyful expression appeared on Eleanor's face. She gave Emma the gift bag. Inside were a handmade scarf and a small note that read, "Grandma can change too." Before the meal began, everyone sat at the same table, and Emma was asked to say words of thanks. She started in a small voice but gradually began to speak with confidence. "I'm thankful that Grandma has started to change, that Grandpa has become stronger, that Mom is smiling again, that Dad has come back, and that we can all be together." Carol had tears in her eyes at her daughter's words, and Mike put his arm around her shoulder. Across the table, Walter was gently holding Eleanor's hand. Tears also shone in Eleanor's eyes. Everyone sat at the same table, and warm mashed potatoes were distributed to all. There's no such thing as a perfect family anywhere. But wounded hearts were gradually healing, and new bonds were being formed. That was the true meaning of this Thanksgiving.